Hello everyone, welcome to Coffee Cup Enlightenment. Today I'm going to give you a review on the paradigm of is it us, the one that identifies and disidentifies, or we simply the awareness that sees this happening, and is it the conceptual self doing this? If we begin an investigation into this paradigm, it has several implications. Before I get into these implications, I do want to sort of talk about a little bit more what happened last week during this, I guess what you might call a disturbance. A very strong state of disturbance occurred. And what I realise now from reflection of this is thousands of writings over many years, such disturbances haven't really come about. Usually you've had disturbances just not in the process of writing. They've just come about amidst just normal day-to-day life, or maybe doing it in other aspects of life, in self-inquiry. I've had disturbances arise, but never they've really come about in such a strong manner in the middle of a writing. And from reflection, what I see in this is that whatever I've been writing over the last 10 years, no one can speak from a level more than their current state of awareness. And whatever was written in the last 10 years, it has become apparent upon an investigation that there's a doer and a doing going on in this self-inquiry process. Awareness is still happening, things are being disidentified with, progress appears to be being made, but still there is this doer, and there is this person and identity. And it came about when I was beginning to reread before posting, just to check for spelling mistakes or whatever, and just to make sure all the sentences and the grammar was okay. When I began to read, this massive inner disturbance occurred. And a better word I have now to describe it would be dismay. A very, very strong feeling, dismay. And the feeling wasn't just like a medium level, it was very, very strong, to such that it was almost like the conceptual self was saying, run away, run away. And the awareness knew that there was nowhere to run, and this just birthed even more dismay. And the moment I just, the awareness kicked in and recognized this dismay as not I, but a manifestation of, or an expression of a conceptual self. It had nothing to do with who I was. And I began to relax in this, uncomfortableness of awareness emerged. This feeling of dismay was swallowed up by this peaceful arising awareness, and then as that disappeared, the insight came out of what I'm talking about in this video, which is the topic of is it we, I, that identify and disidentify, or is all this happening through the conceptual self? And so as obviously the awareness was strong enough and prevalent enough already, and what I realized that this dismay was pretty much the natural dissolvement that happened spontaneously, on its own, not through any conscious act of awareness. It dissolved on its own because the first sentence triggered it when it was reflected upon the other 29 sentences. The awareness emerged out of this realization in contrast of these sentences, and as a result the awareness could not coexist with something that was identified with. And this something that was identified with was the doer. There's still a doer process, an aware, one that wants to become aware, that wants to recognize thoughts, that wants to disidentify from thoughts. And this doer is a conceptual self. It's a personal identity that's not been looked at. And this first sentence, as described in last week, exposed this doer, where dismay was arisen as an expression of the doer. For what better emotion to represent the falseness of the endeavours of the doer? Dismay, what a perfect match. The doer's purpose is to endeavour, to succeed, to achieve, and when it doesn't get all these, when the pathways of all its doings are realised as futile, not because ultimately what it seeks is futile, but the doer itself is futile. What a perfect reflection that dismay shall arise. And if the awareness is there, not to identify with this dismay, then the death of this doer can occur. And that's what happened last week. It's at the point where identification doesn't happen for too long within me now. The awareness is so strong, and even if I might get torn into extreme levels of emotions, it's usually within a few moments, like 15 seconds or so, that the awareness comes back again, and is able to recognize what's happening and see what is this dismay. Who is the one being dismayed, felt dismayed? Is it really I? And of course the awareness detected that it wasn't I. And out of that the insight came, a new insight, that it is not I who identify, nor is it I that disidentify, nor is there anything actually going on or happening, or is there a doing. Nothing was ever done, and nothing is ever undone in the space of the one that's sitting back and having a cup of tea and watching this doer. As you recognize your identity as that, then there's actually nothing going on in that state, because you're looking at the screen, and what's going on the screen is the doing, and the doer is on the screen, but you are not that. So what are the implications then from this new paradigm? If we aren't doing, if we aren't identifying, we never did identify, nor was it ever possible. We aren't disidentifying from thoughts, that's not ever possible. What are some of the implications? And when you look at lots and lots of teachings, there are a few methods that have a lot of truth to them, but when you look at it from this paradigm, that we aren't identifying nor disidentifying, they don't necessarily have total truth. They are of benefit to the awareness, for where that awareness currently is, but in the bigger picture that there is no doer, that nothing is ever done, these methods are no longer needed, and nor are applied anymore, or necessary, or of value. So some of these methods could be described as they're methods that apply to certain particular levels of states of awareness, but in the bigger picture, when awareness comes in even more, they're not needed anymore. So one of these methods that I'll give as an example is responsibility. What more of a noble purpose of truth does taking self-responsibility have? And what this does, it takes us out of the continual birth of re-identification through blaming others, but ultimately it is the conceptual self that blames others, and it is the conceptual self trying to rectify this. Therefore, there is no responsibility needed for the true I that's sitting in the cinema in the background, sipping on a cup of tea, watching this on the screen. The one that's sipping the cup of tea is perfect. It's nothing needs to be done to it, nothing needs to be fixed on it, and it's and responsibility realm only exists for the conceptual self, not the true I, the one that's sitting in the cinema sipping on a cup of tea. The concept of taking responsibility would be bemused, would be found amusing to the one sipping on the cup of tea, watching the cinema, the perfect one. And I'm just trying to think now of another system. So self-responsibility is a very common, necessary pointer to bring about more awareness, which stops this cycle of the conceptual self being a victim and blaming others. And then when you bring in self-responsibility, it starts to diminish this continual identification through blaming and bring about this identification. But then now you have the responsible one, and this too is the conceptual self. And then that's why it can give rise to tendencies of the conceptual self then arguing at others for being non-responsible. And the argument comes from the fact that there is still a conceptual self at place. Even though it has evolved now, it's no longer a victim, it's taken responsibility, to so to speak, it still is a conceptual self. Unfortunately I didn't write them down, but there is some other ones, if I can just wait to see if I can remember some of the other ones. So one of them is self-responsibility. I guess going back to sort of other examples is like letting go. Again, this is a very good method for a current state of awareness where the conceptual self is so identified to certain concepts that it's creating struggle. And if you're bringing a direction of letting go, then it raises your awareness to a point where you can see what you're identified with, to the point where they're no longer identified with, and so too letting go happens on its own. But here too births the letter goer. It is still a doer. Letting go is a doer, and this doer is still the conceptual self. So if you look back again to the one sipping on the cup of tea, that's already perfect, that's watching the video, that's watching the movie of this letter goer, for less of a better word to describe it. Even this is smiled at. I don't need to let go of nothing, for there was nothing to ever have been held on to, ever. So these letting go, taking self-responsibility, being honest with yourself, we can say, that's a third one. This is a very popular one as well, and again this pertains to the realm of a certain level of awareness. It's very applicable, very useful, but even here, sorry, I've forgotten what that last one was, but even here, that still pertains to the realm of someone doing something. What about forgiveness? To forgive things, obviously, then again pertains to the realm of that. If it raises your level of awareness, it's useful, and it generates a level of awareness to see that grievances only strengthen the conceptual self, to create an identity for the conceptual self. So for the use of act of forgiveness, then we can undo this grievance and become free from the corresponding emotions that are created that come from grievances, all the stresses that it causes to the body, and all the reactive patterns that dissolve to other people when you change your paradigm of awareness to seeing that for what all the aspects. There's many aspects of forgiveness. To see that it's only burning yourself, it's only damaging yourself. It's not for others, it's for yourself, and you feel better for when you forgive. But even here, you got the forgiver, and the forgiver is a doer. And the one sitting back, sipping on the cup of tea, watching the movie, that's already perfect, that never was participated in any parts of unforgiveness, nor does it need to participate in any activities of forgiveness. Both are not necessary in this bigger picture. And the implications of this is that it ultimately, although I've spoken about this in writings many years ago of no self, it's really come into play in the last week of what no self really means. There was this awareness brewing up, maybe giving writings and talks about no self, but in the picture, when you look back and see this one that's sipping on the cup of tea, that's watching all the doings that's going on, and you see that this I that's sitting in the cinema there is no self in even that. It's just pure awareness. It doesn't pertain to any identity whatsoever. This awareness does not participate in any doings whatsoever, nor any undoings. It doesn't have anything to do with anything that has been done, and nothing needs to be undone. And this is bringing back the awareness back into itself. When you strip away everything and see that this doer and all the realms that it partakes in, even if these realms partake in this identification and generated much more clarity and peace in your life, the next level of peace that arises is even stepping back and just in the awareness that you already are, and seeing that this doer, this forgiver, this letter goer of things, this whatever other examples I used, even these need to be noted as the conceptual self. And this becomes the end of the spiritual ego. So yeah, this is just something to contemplate. Take another step back and see that even this one that's doing everything that seems to be creating positive effects in your life, and it does. It seems to be very apparent in my experience in the last 14 years that self-awareness as the doer has seemed to work a lot in creating a lot more clarity, a lot more peace. But this doer still keeps the conceptual self in place. And this doer then creates reactivity still. If there is no doer, if there is no self, not because you're trying to get rid of anything to be even more better, or more clearer, or more peaceful, you're just seeing a fact. You're letting self-inquiry do its job on its own. That you're looking at, this one that's doing, even if it's forgiving, letting go, whatever, allowing, it still pertains in the round of doing, or a doer. And this isn't new. It's not to be believed as not you. It's just simply seen. When you allow awareness just to reflect in a simple investigation and self-inquiry, you'll see that not even this doer is needed for my identity. Even though it has very noble purposes on what it's done, and even though it seems to have done lots of great work over the years, and it seemed to have got me quite far, so to speak, But stepping back into the awareness, realise that you go on a journey only to discover that where you end up is where you already are. And that's the cosmic joke. The book, The Alchemist, is a very beautiful book that depicts this story of going on a great journey only to discover that the riches that you were looking for were already where you started from. As other people have described it, it's like climbing a ladder, only to discover that there is no ladder. There's nowhere where you already are is home. But sometimes it takes a journey to come back to the point of origin to realise your treasures that you already are. So thank you very much. I'll leave you with that. Just to ponder, to meditate on, just to recognise, pay attention throughout your day if of any doer, even though it has noble purposes. Thank you.